Wanted to thank everybody for coming out tonight. This is a big event in a lot of ways. A lot of the folks who are here are people who I've known for many, many years. People who have seen me through thick and thin and actually have listened to me talk about this project for a long time, of which I'll give some acknowledgement to here at the end. But this is a passion that has just came out of, once it came out of nowhere, it developed out of a baseball odyssey with the Red Sox and the fantasy camp that turned into someone saying, hey, there's a town up in the Dominican Republic called Sosúa that has Jewish origins. And I'm like, really? And from there, I did a lot of investigation and I found out a lot more about this very little known story about the Holocaust. And it's something that in today's day and age particularly, I was here a few weeks ago and I went to the Israeli bookstore just down the road and I happened to ask about just the Holocaust in general and if they knew anything about the DR and this particular story, and they said, well, you know what, people don't really buy, the young people don't buy Holocaust books anymore like they used to. We don't stock them. And I thought that's really notable because in today's day and age, with all the contemporary issues that are going on, it's not a story to be forgotten. So back a year ago, I had this thought that after my trip that I wanted to find a way to better educate and remember, which is the mission of this foundation, of the nonprofit organization which I've begun, to better educate folks on this story, that there's so many stories of the Holocaust that go unknown and people don't see, and this was a great opportunity to kind of mix my baseball background and synergies with the Dominican Republic with this particular story. So I just got back 3 weeks ago from the DR, which I had an opportunity to meet with a lot of different government officials, real estate developers, folks who are in government who are very supportive of this project. So Sosúa 75 is a nonprofit organization committed to not just remembering a week-long celebration or a weekend celebration of the 75th anniversary, but to create a long-standing remembrance of the heritage of the area, which is very, very rich. There's so many folks who I've talked to in recent months who have no idea about this story whatsoever. It never ceases to amaze me, the number of folks who I've met who have no idea that this ever happened. So this is a great opportunity to showcase this through this film, and I'm very, very pleased for the gracious acceptance of my invitation to showcase their film, the award-winning filmmakers from Willow Pond Films, Peter Miller, Renee Silverman. There was also a very interesting synergy in the sense that one of the other films, acclaimed films that they have done is Jews and Baseball, an American Love Story. So I said, you know what, this was meant to be, that we had this commonality. So anyway, so tonight I wanted to have the opportunity to talk about this film, have them present the film. It's not often that I get a chance to stand in front of my friends and family and folks that I've known for a very, very long time. There's too many thanks to go around, but there are folks that I definitely want to recognize here briefly before we move on with the program who are the sponsors of this event. So Cohen Investment Advisors, Josh Konoff is here. Josh, if you could just raise your hand. I can't see without my glasses. Great. He is also the head of bostonvolunteers.org, which is the largest volunteer organization within Boston for 401k rate, all different types of races and amazing events. So Josh, thank you to you and your group for sponsoring this event. Also Hideaway Beach, which is a place I just stayed at. It's beautiful, it's right on the ocean, and that's a developer that really knows the area very, very well. So I guess I wanted to thank a number of folks as well quickly before we got into the film. On the agenda tonight, in addition to Renee and Peter presenting their film, is Sky Stevenson, Dr. Sky Stevenson from Keene State College. Keene has a very, very, Keene State, New Hampshire, by the way, which is my home state. I spent every weekend in Keene for the better part of 15 years supporting an account there, and it's a fantastic center that they have there, the Keene Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies, and Sky is the Global Program Education. I'm trying to remember all these. Director. So I'm very, very pleased that she would actually join the board of directors and be willing to participate in this event tonight. Thank you, Sky. So this event was publicized to many, many folks over the course of the last month through jewishboston.org and through the Israeli consulate, through the Dominican consulate, and I also don't want to fail to recognize Alexander Garcia and his family who are here from the Dominican consulate. If you guys would stand up and please give a round of applause to them. I love your country. It's kind of become my second home, and I'm hoping that the fruition of this vision, which is a project which will incorporate a number of different elements to bring together a Jewish Dominican Cultural Center. If anyone have had the chance to look at the website, Sosúa75.org, it lays out what our vision is, who's on our board of directors, and I'm happy to say after my trip there, I have a lot of support. After the 1st of January, I kind of was, there were times where I said, boy, this is a pretty lofty goal here, developing a whole center and a butterfly sanctuary and baseball field and all that's on the website, but every time that I had a little bit of doubt, it seemed like the very next day I had somebody call me up, send me an email, say, you know what, this is a great idea, this is awesome what you're doing, and keep going, keep the fight going. So even in the midst of some unanticipated opposition to this, I've only received positive strokes and praise for the continuation of this effort, which I continue to plan to pursue. And this is a landmark event for me to, again, have Peter and Renee here. It's kind of a homecoming for Peter, being from Massachusetts, and maybe he can speak later a little bit about his Willow Pond, the origins of Willow Pond films. But there's so many people here who I want to thank for attending. And my family, actually, my children could not be here because my daughter got married last weekend and they took all their time off work to go to the event last weekend. So they couldn't be here today, but again, between the friends that I've known for many, many years that have supported me and understand this, and to Jocelyn, where's my girl, Jocelyn, girlfriend, who has listened late at night to all of my rants and ravings and has been a great sounding board for, this very complex initiative. Thank you, Jocelyn. So anyway, is Walter Black here? I'm trying to see if Walter Black is here. He was my webmaster, and he's kind of the genius behind all of the graphics of the website, which has gotten a tremendous amount of compliments. So I don't see him here yet. There we go. Now I can actually see you guys. But anyway, so my thanks to you all for coming and for your support of this initiative. I hope that you'll take a look at it in a deeper way and know that, from my recent trip, there's a tremendous amount of support from the highest levels of government for this project to move on. The central bank, through the senator of the state and the governor of Puerto Plata, which is the province over the city of Sosúa, which we'll be talking about, actually offered up a piece of land from the central bank for us to use as a place to begin this project. So there's still a lot of work to be done, but I appreciate everybody coming very much. And from there, I'm going to pass it over to Sky Stevenson, who has some words about to educate and remember.
Thank you very much for inviting me here, and I just want to say it's a real honor to work with everybody here around the vision and dream of trying to create a center to educate and remember a particular chapter in the Holocaust. Again, my name is Sky Stevenson, and I work at Keene State College. I'm the director of the Global Education Office, and Keene State College is really proud to have the only undergraduate major in Holocaust and Genocide Studies in the United States. It's called the Cohen Center because it's funded in part by the family that owns C&S wholesalers that live in the Keene area. And we're really, really proud of this program. And over the years that I've worked at Keene, we've tried to develop several global programs and projects to help expand our students' understanding of the Holocaust and of genocide. So we opened up programs in Krakow, Poland. So he now has a direct exchange with Jagiellonian University in Krakow, and we currently have one of our professors there on a Fulbright all this semester doing in-depth research. So we've also had students going to Rwanda and have been developing some really strong resources as well. So that's just a little background, so you know a little bit about New Hampshire and about Keene State College. And Hugh contacted me through the Cohen Center. And when I heard about this project, it was actually a beautiful marrying for me as well, because my background before coming to Keene was in Latin America. I've lived there for maybe 12 years, and before coming to Keene State College, I was working in Latin American program development for several different educational programs. And I have a PhD in Latin American studies. So I actually know Sosúa and Cabarete and used to work with a program in Santo Domingo run by the CIEE. So it's a real pleasure. And I've been reflecting, I don't want to be very pedantic, but I was reflecting even just for a few short moments of what might be meaningful to kind of contribute to this beginning, emerging collective visioning and creating of something to remember and to educate for the future. And what I wanted to do is very briefly share two different thoughts or reflections that might help us as we look forward to creating together what we want the educational program to be. What do we want to be helping future generations remember and educate for? What do we want to do that? So the first I just want to say really briefly, I was thinking about that little spot, Sosúa, in the Dominican Republic, that is a country of 10 million people. And I was reflecting again on the fact that I work at a place that puts Holocaust and genocide studies together. The Holocaust was one horrible experience, and the genocide is a broader experience that has touched different people and different nations throughout human history, unfortunately, and hopefully in the future that won't happen anymore. And I was reflecting how the Dominican Republic in that particular area has actually been witness to 3 genocides in different ways. So if we look at the first genocide, 1494, the very first Spanish settlement in the Americas by Christopher Columbus on a second journey was La Isabela, which was not far from where Sosúa is. He created a small settlement there and then went on to look for gold, leaving some Spaniards. At that time, we don't really know how many Taino Indians were on the island. Estimates run from 600,000 to the millions. But at that time, 20 years later, the numbers were down to maybe 25,000. 10 years after that, they were down to 500, and the Taino Indians no longer exist. They were eliminated. They were one of the first Indian groups to be eliminated, to be destroyed, to no longer exist because of the consequences of the European colonization. Some say that is a type of genocide. So that was the first one. That was the very first. So Sosúa is very close to where that very first settlement was, many centuries ago. So then you fast forward to 1937, 1 year before, in 1938, at the Avion Conference in France, Rafael Trujillo was the only world leader to agree to accept Jewish people who could leave from Germany and Austria. And I guess somewhere from 500 to 1,500 Jews were able to escape from 1938 to 1941 thanks to that. But 1 year before that, he had himself declared what some might say a genocide, or at least a massacre against the border Haitians. If you know, Dominican Republic shares Haiti, and what we kind of know euphemistically as a parsley massacre, because they used how you say parsley, perejil in Spanish, to distinguish the Dominicans from the Haitians, but Dominicans know as el corte, the cutting. Over a few-week period, thousands of Haitians along the border were indiscriminately killed. Nobody quite knows how many. because so many of them weren't registered at the time, but we're talking about thousands. And so it's so interesting that Rafael Trujillo, the same man who 1 year before had massacred many people from Haiti, which was the first country to win, and the only time when slaves revolted and won successful liberation from their colonial powers, the next year he accepted Jewish people fleeing from problems in Europe. So life is complex. Politics are complex. I don't want to say too much, but I think that this place that Hugh has envisioned, Sosúa, has so much potential to teach us so many things, to educate us and future generations. When we were just talking, and Hugh said that young people aren't interested in the Holocaust, it kind of shocked me because at Keene State, I'm always working with these young students who are passionately concerned and trying to understand what happened and how not to repeat it. So the second thing I wanted to do very briefly, I promise I won't spend much time, is in my many years living in Latin America, at one point I had the idea of having a project asking Latin American activists how they define peace. And most of my time I lived in the Southern Cone in Chile. I spent a lot of time in Argentina and Uruguay. And so one of the men I interviewed in 2002 was Daniel Goldman, who was a rabbi in Buenos Aires. I don't know if you know, but Buenos Aires has one of the largest Jewish populations in the Americas. And in the early 20th century, Jews were brought over to be resettled to escape the pogroms. So I interviewed Daniel Goldman. 2002 was a time when there was a lot of economic problems in Argentina, and he turned his synagogue, which was in a pretty affluent neighborhood, into a soup kitchen. So as I was talking to him, they were serving soup to some of the people who had lost their jobs. And I'll just really briefly ask him, because I was asking him what he thought, and since we're in a synagogue and we're talking about Jewish traditions, Jewish heritage, remembering, I thought this was really beautiful. So I asked him, looking to a new century, 2002, what hope do you have? And he said, I think about the idea of truth, justice, and peace. The Jewish tradition has always understood this as 3 stages. There has to be truth for justice, and there has to be justice for peace. You can't skip any stage, because if it's skipped, it comes back again. And then I asked him what his greatest fear was. And I think this is very relevant to the Sosúa 75 potential project. He said, I think a great fear is that the future generations don't have this critical sense. They accept the situation of injustice in which they're living. They do not have a spirit of rebellion. This is what worries me the most. The youth today is quite passive. It's not critical. They don't say, I don't like this. And I think that's very dangerous. So, maybe one of the possibilities that can be created in the educational project that's evolving in Sosúa 75, and I think that this film is showing in a different way, is a criticality of young people being able to not only look to the past, but say, how can we make sure this doesn't happen again? How can we make sure there aren't genocides in the future, and what role might I be able to play? So I want to ask all of you, each of you here, to think, what would you like to see being educated, being created, being taught at this land that's being developed? Who can come down, and what would we want to be studying to make a difference? Nearby, there's a Mariposa Foundation that's been founded in Cabarete that works with disadvantaged women. And so obviously peace goes beyond the past, but how are we going to make the future a better place so we don't have more genocides in the future? So thank you.
So thank you all for coming, and thank you to Hugh for making this evening possible. We're very excited and happy that we're all working together to get the important story of Sosúa out. And Sky, thank you so much for bringing up so many of the points that are in our film, because the film touches upon the Parsley Massacre and the fact of this kind of contradiction between Trujillo, on the one hand, killing Haitians because they were black, and on the other hand, inviting the Jews into the Dominican Republic because they were white. It's a very complex history and a very important history, and also it's a history of reconciliation and the fact that the Jews were welcomed into the Dominican Republic and really it was a safe haven for them is something that we should all commemorate and remember. And we're going to be here, so please think of your questions, and we'll be happy to answer them. And turn over to Peter, who is a hometown boy.
It's a pleasure to be here. I realize my mother grew up about 4 blocks over that way. I come from Lexington. I love to come back to Boston and to show this movie, which hasn't yet been shown in the Boston area, is really an honor. And echoing Skye and Renee, to get this story of this forgotten Holocaust story told, but as important, to reflect on how young people can embrace history and make sense of it and try to make a better world through coming together to confront and deal with complicated history. And that's what our story is about. We are grateful to Hugh for bringing us here, and Skye for contextualizing it. The third critical member of our filmmaking team, Aaron Vega, who edited this film, is a Keene State graduate who studied film, went on to become one of the great documentary film editors, then hung up his spikes to become a state representative in Massachusetts from Holyoke, Mass., where he works. So the worlds converge, and that Hugh is, among his other skills, was a minor league baseball pitcher, and almost made it to the bigs, and that Jews and Baseball is a film that I made a few years ago, which told the story of all kinds of ball players, including Kevin Youkilis and Gabe Kapler, who used to celebrate High Holy Days in this room. So I think that as we proceed on making documentaries, it's all one big film. In any case, we'll watch the movie, we'll talk to you afterwards, and before we roll the film, we have a videotaped presentation from the Israeli Consul General to this room that she specially recorded. So we're going to play that, and then we'll play our movie, and then we'll talk.